This is, I'll have to look again, Richard Atkinson Wills. Richard, hi.
Hi, Bill.
We're going to have a look around the workshops here. It's a great idea to provide workshops for people who can't find the sort of space that they need in the conventional industrial estate situation, providing smaller units here at an economic rent. Is that the sort of picture?
That's the idea. That's always the problem with artists who set up on their own. The premises are just never available to do small projects, and obviously units on industrial estates much too expensive for the sole trader.
The environment, of course, is much, much nicer out here as well, being set in a farm and a country area.
I think when you're trying to sell a very high quality and therefore expensive handmade product, you have to sell it from a high quality site.
Sure. How long ago actually did you open this place?
We moved here in 1989. We bought the building specifically for this project, and we started operating here only 2 years ago.
So it took you 4 years to get it moving?
Yes, and quite a considerable amount of that time was getting the planning permission from Test Valley.
Not an easy deal, I'm sure.
They were very helpful once they realised that we were producing a really high quality development here.
That's great. Congratulations, Test Valley. It's nice to hear that you're being very helpful here. Shall we go inside and take a look at some of the very interesting units that we've got here in a moment? We're coming into Mark Taylor's workshop now, and he makes free-blown Roman glass using the original techniques and recipes, which is for sale in museum shops and at archaeological sites throughout Europe. Could you show us some of the things that you're doing here?
Well, as you know, I make reproduction Roman glass. If you have a look around the shelves, you can see some of the glassware which I make. In the early Roman Empire, around the 1st, 2nd century AD, strong colours were used, strong purples and blues. But later on in the 3rd, 4th century, you get these paler colours being introduced. All of my glass at the moment is free blown. We are experimenting with mould blown shapes as well.
So all the darker bits we're seeing here are based on much older patterns. How many years, or hundreds of years, difference for the development from the dark to the light?
Well, I mean, it just phases in over really no more than I should say a generation or so at the most.
What made you choose an historical process rather than a modern process?
I'm by profession an archaeologist, or I used to be an archaeologist, and I've been interested in glass since I was a teenager. And really it's a combination of both interests.
I see. What area do you blow in? Can you show us the sort of thing that you do?
Yeah, I'm not actually building.
You're not blowing at the moment?
Today, no, I haven't got any glass.
Could you give us some clue of what you have to do anyway?
Well, there's the main material for glass making is sand. That's about 70% sand, and then I include chemicals such as soda ash, sodium carbonate, limestone, aluminium oxide, and various colouring agents such as cobalt and copper and iron as well. Mix them up in the proper. It's really like making. It's really like cookery, I suppose. Really,
You're making a cake, but it turns out transparent.
That is known as glass batch. It's the mixture of the raw materials. Literally, what I can do is I can show you exactly what I do. It just gets shoveled into the. Let's use the other one.
Richard's just putting what looks like a mixture of something off somebody's beach here.
It's not.
Which is not, into the furnace. Right, off you go.
Straight into the furnace, excuse me. And there's a pot full of glass batch in there, and that will stay in there until tomorrow morning. Then it'll be melted. I can do what I want with it then. At the moment it's running at 1050 centigrade. I usually melt glass. I can melt glass up to about 1180 centigrade, but I tend not to go higher than that.
So when your molten product comes out of the furnace, then what happens?
Well, then I can gather it out of the furnace and blow it into
So the sort of glass blowing techniques which have often been shown on educational programs apply in this case. You use a tube and get a blob of glass and away you go. Is that it?
Basically it, yes.
I think something's going to happen. Here we go.
Gathered from the very bottom of the pot, so it's a bit tricky to get any decent glass on the blowing iron, excuse me. It's just a very useful tool. It helps to shape the glass and to cool it down.
Surprised there's enough softness in there to actually blow it up, but obviously there is. Now there it comes, there's the bulb. I don't know what we're making, but it's very interesting. Right, Mark, thank you very much indeed for showing us around your workshop. Most interesting, and I wish you a great deal of luck. Cheers. Bye-bye. Fry's Art Foundry. Mark cast bronze from the lost wax process, which is a very, very old and traditional process. Mike.
Yes.
Mike Fry.
Yes.
Mark,
Hi.
tell us about the process that you use with your bronze casting. Can you please?
Well, to do that, we'd have to start at the other end and gradually work along
Let's do that.
to do it all the way.
Let's do
through,
that.
you know. Okay.
Let's go down. We're going to go to the other end of the studio. Follow me.
When an artist brings their original end, be it in clay, plasticine, whatever it is, it can be a horse, figure, you name it. And when the artist brings it in, we then make a mould, which is made out of a plaster jacket and a rubber skin. Now, if I can show you behind you, what we have here is a rubber mould surrounded with a plaster jacket. That's purely to give it some rigidity. From this, we then swill this with wax, and we give it 2 to 3 swills, and we end up then with a wax figure, much like this one. And the wax is hollow. So we now have a complete wax replica of the original. We then come to a process called running and rising. Now, and this really is where the metal's going to go in and where the air comes out. And what we use is a wax cup, which we have up there, and onto that wax cup we put what we call runners, which are just wax bars, solid wax bars. These in fact will take the metal in, and I'll show you in a moment what carries on from there. These ones again are thin wax bars. These will in fact take the air out. When we
If you didn't do this, you'd get an explosion, basically, would you?
Yes, so you'd get bubbles and an airlock and the metal wouldn't run. Once the job has been run up, then we come over to this stage over here, which is dipping it in ceramic.
Well, of course, this is this particular artist work, which is like that, is it?
Yes. What we have here is, this is the wax cup. These are the wax bars that are the runners to take the metal in. These are the thin wax bars to take the air out, because eventually it will be that way up when we pour the metal in. So the metal will go in through these thick bars, and the air will come out of the thin ones, and also will eventually fill up with metal as well. So you've got to remember that this underneath here is the wax figure, all right, and it's hollow. What we then do is dip that wax into a ceramic mix about 7 to 8 times, and we coat it with what's basically China clay. We let that air dry, so you're looking at a week, really.
Which is what they're doing on the rack now, is it?
Yes. They've just had a dip, and we'll do another one tomorrow and one the following day after. When they've had 7 or 8 coats, we then, sounds crazy, but we knock a hole through the ceramic and fill the inside of the wax up with a core mix. It's basically the same sort of thing as the ceramic on the outside. Once you've got that done, we then take it to the burnout furnace and fire it. Now that not only fires the ceramic and makes it really rock hard, but also melts the wax out. So you then end up with an outside ceramic shell, a gap, and the core. So it's just a hollow piece then. We then melt our metal up in ingots and pour it in. And then comes up to the chasing side to show you what something looks like when it has been cast. Making sure that doesn't fall over. If you'd like to come this way, it has just been cast. And this, in fact, is the bronze metal. This is the outside ceramic shell, right, which obviously we knock off. And there's a hole here, which is where we knocked it through, and that's the core mix in there. Now that we drill out, so that you end up with a hollow bronze again.
When you say you drill it out,
It's just like a...
because it's all over the whole piece, isn't it?
It's all inside,
Yeah.
yes. So you get as much out as you possibly can. For one reason, it makes the thing a lot lighter. I mean, the weight of that probably is about 20 pound at the moment. Well, knock it down by half when the core mix comes out. And all these runners and risers then have to be chased off. In other words, you've got to put the detail back that you might have taken out with runners and risers, especially where you've got runners going into, say, the rear of, or in this case, a bull. It could be a horse, could be any figure. So you've got to replace the texture that the artist has put on. Now this one has started to be chased and finished. Where the runners went into the rear of the horse and into the jockey and into the hand, and the risers, where they were taken off here, all that is being replaced and chased back in so that nobody can tell the process that's occurred. Once it's done and it's fitted to a base, it's then patinated, and for that we use some very, very weak acids. They are human friendly. We try to use human friendly stuff as much as possible. And the patination can be really anything in varying shades of brown, some reds, and the greens. As you can see, there are figures on the bench there that are finished and patinated. There's the dolphins and penguin. There's a couple of abstract pieces.
Now, is patination always applied, or, I mean, in most forms of architectural development and furniture, the patina has to develop over the centuries by treatment?
Well, it would take an awful long time if you were to just leave an ordinary freshly chased bronze outside to get a real deep, rich patina. So they've always been treated with chemicals. I mean, in the old days, they might bury them in a pit with horse manure on top. Ammonia obviously affects the bronze, starts to turn it green, browns, all sorts of colours. Some people even still do it that way.
I see. Because in antique stuff, you generally feel, you hear of things which are bronzed rather than bronze,
Yes.
which has not such a good appeal if it's bronzed. But in essence, that material wouldn't necessarily be bronze underneath. It'd be a...
Oh yes, it could be. Bronzed, I see what you're getting at. Bronzed material can be very many metals, but usually when people talk about a bronze, it's a hot cast bronze, not a cold cast plastic. It's a hot cast bronze, and it has been patinated with chemicals. The chemicals we put on give it a colour straight away. Now, and that obviously is going to mature over the years. And when you come to the antique bronzes, they have been patinated in exactly the same way. But you try and leave that original patina on. If let's say something was done in 1760, just as an example, and the original patina was on it, you want to keep that original patina because the colour is mellowed, it's part of the original job. It also helps give it a value. We could, if somebody brought us one and they really wanted it done, we could sandblast all that original patina off and give it another one. But I mean, you just don't do that. I mean, the patinas that we put on, hopefully, will last as long as the bronzes do, which could be hundreds of years. One certainly hopes so, anyway.
The sort of work that you got here, are these famous artist products or just people who are doing it for pleasure? I mean, there's some very good quality stuff here, obviously.
Well, we have a few professional artists, sculptors, who do it for a living. But most of our clients are just ordinary run-of-the-mill people who have either started doing it as a hobby and found that it's given them a little bit of extra return, a little bit of pocket money. Sell originally probably to friends, and some of them it increases, so they start to sell further afield. But I would say most of them it's more for pleasure than for financial gain.
Racing to the finish, it's called.
Fabulous. Who's this by?
This is Willie Newton's sculpture. He's just had an exhibition in London and did very well.
Great.
Yeah. Of course, when it's finished, I mean, the tail will be back on here, and
You just braise those on, do you?
well, we weld them on
Oh, right.
properly. You don't sort of braise them. That be on like that. And the other one, the other side. Nobody will know that we've actually done that, of course.
There's so much life in this stuff, isn't there?
Oh yeah, yeah. And you make all sorts. This is the fun of the job. Last week it was 4 sets of dogs, dolphins, bull. It's never the same thing.
This has to be an expensive process, doesn't it?
Oh, it is. Oh yeah. Everything's done by hand. Right.
With the 4 sets of the dogs, those are 4 off, presumably. What's it going to cost to do that?
I can't tell you that.
Can't tell you that.
Me and the client that
Quite so.
actually make-
Quite so.
Because it varies a little bit on how difficult it is actually to do. I mean, some things are hard to make, some things are easy. I mean, this particular horse is quite easy, so it will be less expensive than these behind. They've got jockeys on, reins and all that sort of stuff, and it all makes a difference. But we agree a price before we start making it, and we have to stick to it, whether we do it wrong or not.
So time used up talking to television reporters is a bit of a nuisance.
It's expensive, but we don't care.
All right, Mike, thanks very much. Nice to talk to you. Cheers. Bye-bye. This is Jeremy Choppin's studio or workshop, and he's known as Jem rather than Jeremy, I think. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
You studied at the Makepeace School,
Parnham in Dorset, yeah.
which is where Viscount Linney did some...
Yes, I think he was one of the first intake, about 15 years ago, I think.
Well, that was something, but you're the man of the moment at the moment, so this is what we want to talk about. Some beautiful, lovely, lightweight-looking furniture you've got over there. We're going to have a look at that at the moment. But how actually long have you been making here?
Since January this year.
So very recent.
Yeah.
You getting a good response?
Yes, I've just featured these pieces and one other piece in a London exhibition recently, and got quite a bit of work from that. And it's beginning to sort of snowball now, you know, word of mouth, and the more pieces you get out there, the more response you get.
You sold to individual purchasers. Of course, it must cost a lot of money to create an individual piece of furniture.
Yes, they don't come cheap, so I have to target the people who can afford it, and there's no shortage of people with deep pockets.
That's nice to hear anyway. Mine seems to be extraordinarily shallow at the moment.
Well, it is a screen. I used to call it a screen. I now call it a room divider, because people say to me, it doesn't actually screen anything. So it's actually intended as a decorative room divider. You know, it's a fun piece, really. But
room dividers seem to smack horribly of Scandinavian pieces of furniture from the 50s, but it's nothing like that at all. Well, what's the wood it's made of?
There's 2 woods. The lighter wood is cherry. The lighter wood is ash, and the darker wood is cherry. Ash is particularly good for bending, which is why I used...
Because ash was the wood that was used to build car bodies in the 30s and 20s for that reason, isn't it?
Morris Traveller, I think, is made of ash. And it has good sort of longevity sort of qualities.
It's a beautiful piece of work. It must be very difficult to maintain the curves in relationship to one another in each piece there.
Well, it took quite a long time to design and to get the angles right, because there's a compound angle working here. It's actually angled this way and it's angled this way, and getting each piece to intertwine took a while, but I'm quite pleased with the results.
It's beautiful, because it's obviously just not a matter of bending a piece of timber between 2 other bits. Every spatial relationship refers to the next piece down, doesn't it?
Yes.
And on the other side.
Yes, it works all the way around. And what's interesting is if you put it in front of a window, and you walk into a room, the room different times of the day when the light is shining through at different angles, you see a different screen because it casts different shadows on the floor, and the piece comes alive. It's a popular piece to have in exhibitions. People like it.
Not only that, it's a wonderful demonstration of your skills as well, isn't it?
Possibly, yes.
Very shy man, this. Very shy. chair here, which I'm not sure we're going to get on camera, really Macintosh influenced or not?
If I had £1 for every person who said that to me, possibly,
Sorry about that.
possibly a subliminal influence, but I don't know. I think it's got a bit of me in it. I used to do a lot of, well, I still do a lot of windsurfing and surfing, and my sort of involvement with the ocean and the sea and wind sort of comes into all my pieces. And
Hence the sort of separate waveform.
yeah,
tops
I mean,
here.
it's sort of, I don't have to force it. It's just something that comes out in my designing, and in fact, sometimes I have to sort of play it down a bit. I have to forget about windsurfing when I'm designing. But when I design for other people, obviously I have to take into account what interests them and what they want. And the design process involves lots of sketches, models and drawings which the client will look at, and if they don't like, we can talk about it and change it. So hopefully, you know, if they're paying a lot of money for a piece of furniture that I make and design for them, they're actually getting something that they want, and which they can't get anywhere else. You know, they're buying a piece of me, which, you know, is one of the reasons why my furniture is quite expensive, because
That's what any artist would feel, really, isn't it?
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I think the stuff you're making is really beautiful. Thank you very much for talking to me. Bye-bye. Okay, Joe Berryman. We're talking to each other as though we're on camera. We're not. Steve's coming to us now, and he's now looking to us. Joe Berryman, you've been here how long?
Just over a year, just about a year.
And you make pottery ornaments?
Mostly earthenware pottery. No, not ornaments so much as pots you use every day.
Right.
And a lot of oil burners, which are very popular.
This is for what, scenting the air?
Yes, I've been making a lot of these. These are actually for sent out to shops. I do them in large quantities. They're not the usual type of burner, but...
Do you fire these here?
Yes, it's all fired here. Put the candle at the bottom, and oil and water in the top, and it's like a vaporiser.
Super. Certainly beats a psst thing.
Oh yes, much better, and it goes on longer, long as you remember eventually to blow the candle out.
Aromatic oils.
Yes, and also for aromatherapy, you know, people use these. So
I'm particularly fascinated by your pieces which involve little pumps and fountains and things which appeal to the mechanical side of my nature. Could you show us one of those?
Yes, I'll just put this back.
We're going to do a complicated crossover in camera here. Excuse us.
Excuse us.
Very well executed.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, well, this will sit on a bowl. This will be terracotta colour eventually when it's fired. At the moment it's wet, it's still drying. And underneath is a bowl with a pump, little tiny pump in it. And the water comes up through here and into there and back down again through the holes. It's just circulated all the time.
Trompe-l'oeil in fact that we think it's going on forever, but it's not. It's just pumped around.
I know, I get these sort of comments, oh, why can't you fill it with red wine and then it'll be constantly flowing, you see, with it. That's come up a few times. That's one, and there's another one there. They're usually not glazed, but the leaves I sometimes glaze. These are actually taken from real leaves outside.
So the leaves will be coloured, but the background will be just in terracotta.
Yes.
I think it's a lovely idea because the tinkling of the water in the background is so nice in a house anyway.
Well, it disturbs some people.
Have to keep getting up.
Yes, that's right. Yes, something like that. There are various variations on that, but they've been very popular this year probably because it's been so hot.
Now your racks are quite empty at the moment because you just finished 3 days down at Broadlands.
Partly that I've just packed 2 kilns. One's going to be fired tonight. The big blue one. There's a big blue one over there.
Big blue kiln.
They're both electric kilns, and then there's a round one over there which I'm just packing with what's called a bisque firing, first firing. And the 1 or 2 more things will go in there tomorrow.
The bisque is just what, a slip on it on
it's
it.
a first firing. I fire to about 920 centigrade, and then the pots are glazed. I'll show you a glazed pot. Can I go over that?
Yes, we're walking. We're not on camera. Ah, we are now.
Now this white is a glaze.
That is a glaze.
Yes,
but
that
it's
is
not a lustrous glaze, as it were.
And no, it's waiting to be fired a second time. It's been fired once. It feels like a plant pot at the moment. Underneath, it's sort of rough. And you put the glaze on as a liquid. It's wet. And the pot is so porous it immediately dries like this, like a powder. And it's fired a second time. This will be fired to about 1100 centigrade.
And that takes the shine. What actually is the material used in the glaze on the pot?
It's got quite a lot of borax in it, and whiting and flint and that sort of thing. It's like putting a layer of glass over it, really. And I'll show you inside the kiln if you like. They all look very, very similar, but they'll all come out different colours.
Now these are oil burners again.
Those are oil burners.
Yes.
There's some big jugs at the back.
And there's some huge dishes down at the bottom there.
Dishes, yes. They're oven-proof dishes.
How long will this fire for?
I'll turn it on. It'll go on tonight, and it'll finish tomorrow morning. And then it takes a couple of days, really, to cool down.
These appear to be being fired flat on the actual surface. I always thought in pottery there were little pins underneath.
Yes, you do with china and that sort of thing. I couldn't do it with that. It would probably warp. It's very flat, actually, and I don't glaze them underneath.
You see something else I didn't know, Steve? Again.
Some of them, I mean, they're glazed underneath, but they've got a foot, which is... I hope this will... The foot ring is unglazed, and the rest of it is glazed.
I'll have your little mouse and your cheese cover there.
That's a special order for somebody, so... It's just waiting.
Stephen, macro shot for a mouse look. Okay, one of the things, of course, which we forgot to mention is how you actually make these pieces. They're actually thrown on the wheel.
Most of them are thrown on the wheel, yes.
And when you call it throwing, is just because the initial act of depositing
Yes,
the
it's
clay
just
is a
actually
throw?
throwing it onto the wheel
That's
head.
why it's called-
That's why it's called throwing, yes.
And the actual lift is called what?
That's pulling it up or drawing it up.
Sounds like a lot of fun. I have to tell you about...
turn the bottoms afterwards.
Oh dear. I have to tell you that Joe came to dinner at the Shears last week, so obviously we get on quite well.
Very nice dinner, actually.
Thank you. It's all the right things. Thank you very much. Very
Right,
nice to
thank you very
meet
much.
in the studio.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.